Hello and welcome to Quadriga, DW's international talk show. I'm Brian Thomas and this is our U.S. election special, coming to you from the heart of the German capital, Berlin. Well, it was the shot heard round the world, the election of Donald Trump to America's highest office and what's called the most powerful position in the world. Trump has promised a second American revolution, and now his supporters will expect him to deliver on that promise. In his acceptance speech, he offered reconciliation with those across the political divide. Hillary Clinton didn't take the stage as hoped as the news broke, and her bitterly disappointed Democrats are now wondering what a Donald Trump presidency will mean for them. Donald Trump has promised to put America first, including when it deals with its friends and enemies abroad. What can Americans and what can the rest of the world now expect from a Donald Trump presidency? To talk about that, I'm happy to be joined now in the studio by our guests, Matthew Karnitschnig. He's the chief European correspondent for Politico, based here in Berlin. He says, we're witnessing the revenge of the disenfranchised white working class, and not just in the U.S. Trump is everywhere. We're also with Tom Goeller. He's a seasoned political journalist who focuses on American and security affairs. He says the new president will urge Germany to substantially increase its defense spending. And we're also happy to have with us Anna Sauerbrey from the Berlin daily Der Tagesspiegel. She's also an op-ed writer for the New York Times. And she says Donald Trump's victory marks a new era in European security politics. We are now on our own. Thanks so much to all of you for being here on what is definitely an historic day, certainly the biggest political event of my life. Matthew, let's start with you, if we could. Is this the beginning of a second American revolution? What were your reactions as the numbers rolled in?
Well, it was interesting because I think that we were all shocked, even though I knew this could happen and thought ahead of time, well, if he wins, I won't really be that surprised. And yet I was surprised. I think everybody was really shocked. And there was this moment of, what does this really mean? Is it a second revolution? I don't really know. And it reminded me a little bit of, what happened after the terrorist attacks of 2011, to be honest, 2001, that, really didn't know where it was going to lead. And that's sort of how I feel right now, is that this is definitely a watershed moment. Everything is going to be different after that. But what it looks like, I don't think anybody can say with any real certainty.
Yeah, Anna, what do you think? An emotional outpouring? What can we expect to happen in America and here in Europe following this? And is it a revolution for you? You've been to America. You were just there for 3 weeks this summer. Do you think it's a second American revolution?
No, I don't think so. It's not a revolution. I think that now voices are being heard that haven't been heard before. But these people have been there, and they have been there for decades. Maybe they got a little more. They have now found an outlet for what they wanted to express, and they have expressed it. But that doesn't really change the country. The country has been divided all along Obama's second term, at least. And as for Europe, I think it's too early to say what it really means for us, because Donald Trump, as many populists, has been very vague in everything he's been saying during his campaign. And now everybody's sort of quivering and awaiting what his very bold statements really live up to in the reality.
To find out not only what the fine points of policy are, but who and how they'll be enacted,
yes.
Right? Who will be enacting them? Tom, what do you think? Are we looking at a new revolution? What was your reaction as you watched all those blue states turn red?
Right. So I'm not that surprised, and I strongly disagree with what you both have said before, because if you would have followed the internet, you would have seen that the opinions on the internet, especially from young people, were extremely different from what was published by the mainstream media, especially from the New York Times, which really is a great disappointment, because for the first time in its history, it became biased and supported.
They're on the road to Canossa now, aren't they?
They have to, but let me come back to, is it a revolution? No, it is a change again. Didn't President Obama start with change? And President-elect Donald Trump said earlier today in his speech, ours is a movement, and that is what I really can underline. It's a movement.
Okay.
And actually, look at the results. It's the majority of America who is behind him. So it's not a divided country.
He has a strong mandate.
It is not a divided country. It is a united country, actually.
Okay, that's an interesting counter theory. Now, Matthew, I'd like to ask you about, what Tom was just talking about here. How the media got it, so much of the media got it so wrong. You're with Politico. What happened? What happened over there? You guys were looking at, Trump going down in flames to Hillary Clinton. How did the media get it so wrong? Were they not looking at those huge Trump rallies?
Well, I think there's a fixation with polls, and I think people were very focused on the polls. And that really is, as a journalist, all you really have to orient yourself by is to look at the polls and see who's winning the horse race. I sort of disagree that the media was implying that it was inevitable that Clinton was going to win. If you remember, just a little over a week ago, when the FBI chief came out and said that there were more emails and all of this, there was all of a sudden, all over the press was like, wow, this is could be a game changer, and Trump could win. And then again over the weekend, the FBI chief came out again and said, well, we didn't find anything, and it wasn't really clear what that was going to mean. So you had so many events over the past 6 months in this campaign, the famous Trump video, for example, all of the stuff with Clinton's staff, with the foundation, the Clinton Foundation. It really was very difficult to tell. And I think, the result is, ultimately surprising because the polls were very wrong. And why were the polls wrong? Well, one reason is that this segment of the population, the white, working-class whites, has proved very difficult for the pollsters to gauge. Maybe because their modeling is wrong, or probably because their modeling is wrong.
A lot of times in the polls, they'll talk to the same people repeatedly over the course of the polling period.
They might be trying to include too many minorities, basically, and it's not really PC to just focus on whites.
We're going to get back to PC. Could this be the end of the PC era? Anna, you were in the U.S. reporting, and you said you talked mainly to minority Americans, black Americans. Was that a mistake to just talk with them and not get out there to white America?
That was just the focus of my research there, but I think that it still was good to look at them, because we see a certain disappointment among the minorities with Hillary Clinton too, and that is that's one piece in the puzzle why she has lost, because she hasn't had the black turnout like Obama has had, and she has lost among the Hispanics too. So many among the Hispanic voters feel they are not represented by the Democratic Party, and I think it is important to look at the minorities too.
Okay, so it's not just a white lash, as it's being called, a backlash from white America. There's also been the loss of the Latino. As far as I understand the results, it's where most of the cast ballots come from. But it's also that she wasn't as strong with Democratic strongholds as she should have been. Okay, Tom, you were saying America's united again. Do you think they're uniting behind nation, God, family, the 3 points that Trump always emphasizes?
That certainly plays a role, but also simply the results that Trump could win at classical democratic households. This is what plays a role, and this is what actually, I think, unites America behind him, because he does not belong to the establishment. Almost everyone hates the D.C. pundits, and Clinton simply stood for that, stood for slickiness and lies and whatever, and it is a kind of, in this respect, a kind of revolution, an uprising, let me say that.
Okay. The New York Times was calling it this morning as well, an uprising. Yes.
But I think it's wrong to say that the country is united behind Trump. I mean, of course, he has won the majority, but still, there's a big portion of the country.
That's going to be the big challenge.
In democratic households. This is actually has won in the backyard of Mrs. Clinton. He cares for the ordinary people. He cares for the working class, which for a long time the Democrats said this is ours, and it's not theirs. And this could have been only.
They're showing their disappointment that they feel among the abandoned. The abandoned that have gone in what's called, Matthew, I don't know if you've heard this expression, it's called the monster vote. If you've been following that at Politico, all these people out there that haven't ever voted before or haven't voted in a long time, showing up, apparently, we're going to crunch all these numbers over the upcoming days, in mass numbers to turn out this vote the way it turned.
Well, look, I mean, all you have to do is look at his rallies, and you know, a lot of people look at the rallies saying, "Oh, well, you can, you know, always get a bunch of kooks together to come to somebody's rally." But if you compared Trump's rallies, which were always full and raucous, and people were really energized,
30,000 people, no problem,
with Hillary Clinton's rallies, where you know, in some cases, you could really hear the crickets in the background.
Paid concerts, no one showing up. Just
I mean, when she
got
stars like John Bon Jovi or Jay-Z and so forth, they had a lot of people there. But you know, despite these demographic changes in the U.S., which really dominated the narrative at the beginning of the campaign, that, well, Trump as a white guy, you know, who's pushing all these racial buttons is not going to be able to win in today's America, that proved to be wrong. And the reason it proved to be wrong is that 40% of the electorate still is white and is working class. Actually, more than 40%, and 70% of the overall electorate is white. So despite these democratic shifts, most of the voters are still whites. And Trump was the one, as you were saying, you know, who really spoke to their concerns. But the problem is it's not really clear what he's going to do about it. And you know, there have been a lot of promises, and you really have to wonder, because we don't really know what his policies are going to be, aside from building a wall and so forth, where he's going to be in 4 years and if he's really going to be able to keep those people behind him.
Yes,
nobody knew.
What in his record so far tells us that he's really going to be the person for the working class white American.
Well, he'd say, and we don't need Tom to do this. Tom, you would jump in. What would Donald Trump say?
Actually, I think we know a lot what Donald Trump is going to do, and nobody knows what he will do in 4 years. We didn't know that President Obama would do such a lousy politics when he started. I mean, we were all full of hope, and what came out was that he became an announcement president without doing something. So if this president, who also announced quite a lot, would fulfill only half of it, he would be way more successful than his predecessor. Let me come to, you say, we don't know what he is going to do. He, in every speech he mentioned,
he's laid out some very specific policy measures.
Especially, for example, when he said today, in his speech, he said, "I'm reaching out to the world. World, I say to you, we want partnership and not conflict." I mean, this was already a message to the world. I'm not the bad guy I was. Printed.
Let's listen to his speech in just a bit here. He also held out a very big olive branch to Hillary Clinton, didn't he? A woman who just a few days ago, he was saying, you know, put Hillary in jail. You know, not only drain the swamp, you know, put Hillary in jail. Let's give a listen to this clip from that speech right now where Donald Trump calls for reconciliation and unity.
Hillary has worked very long and very hard over a long period of time. And we owe her a major debt of gratitude for her service to our country. I mean that very sincerely. Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans.
I was personally very impressed by that acceptance speech. I was almost late for the show because I had to listen to it in its entirety as well as get the kids ready. I know Anna was dealing with that as well. What do you make of the speech? Did he hit all the right tones? Was it gracious?
Well, I mean, I think he hit everything that you would expect someone in his position to do. He won. It doesn't cost him anything to extend an olive branch to Hillary Clinton. But I'm not sure many people are going to buy it. I mean, given the things that he said during the campaign, and you know, every stop he called her corrupt. He was always referring to her as crooked Hillary. Yeah. So now that he's won, to come out and say, "Oh well, we really thank her for her public service." I mean, you know, a few days ago he was saying that he was going to have her investigated if he won the election. So I think it's really, you know, something that her supporters are not going to say, "Oh, well, this is just a normal election. All's well that ends well. Maybe we'll win next time." I think it's going to, and I also disagree. I think the country is very divided in a way that it's polarized. You know, he did get, you know, I don't even know if he got a majority of the popular vote, but he got certainly a majority of the electoral votes and won the country. But I've never in my lifetime seen this kind of hate in the American political system.
I have to agree with you on that, Matthew. One of the things I've always been proud about is America's lack of political violence. We saw it in a big way during this campaign. Very disappointing. You didn't see it at all in the Brexit The Brexit debate went on. Nigel Farage was never roughed up. There was never any difficulties, you know. Anna, what do you think when you look at this acceptance speech? Does it change your mind at all about Donald Trump?
If that's a new Donald Trump, all the better. But I find it hard to believe that. And I mean, he says that at a moment, as Matthew said, where it doesn't cost him much, but where it would cost him to say something different, because it's at a point where the markets are in free falling and money is moving from the dollar to the euro, and the Asian markets are upset. So it's the same thing after Brexit. People came out and said, well, calm down, let's calm the markets, let's calm the political mood, let's calm the world, and then we move on. So it's a smart thing for him to do as a businessman. It's a responsible thing to do as a politician. But I'm not sure that's what we're going to see during the next 4 years.
Let's look at the politics of this. Donald Trump did paint himself into the corner with the crooked Hillary meme, with saying she needs to go to jail. I'll appoint a special prosecutor. How does he now get himself out of that situation? How does he extend an olive branch across the aisle to the Democrats, who, by the way, he really won't need to deal with, because the Republicans have won the House and the Senate? Have to say that. But still, to unite the country, how does he get out of this position now?
A president always can, pardon someone, as Mrs. Clinton's husband did. So he has always a chance to get out of this. But again, let me refer to what you both said before. No matter what Donald Trump is going to say, you distrust him. So don't you think you're both kind of a bit biased? No matter what he says, let me say, if he would not have been gracious to Mrs. Clinton, you would have said, look at him, that's typical him. And now he was gracious, and it's wrong again, or you don't buy it. I mean, this is a kind of bias I really do not understand.
Well, it's not that I personally distrust him. I don't really have a view on it. I'm just saying that Hillary's supporters, the Democrats in the country, are going to watch that speech. And I think that they will probably, many of them, come to the conclusion, he's just saying this because somebody told him that he has to. And there's no doubt, whether you like him or not, that he had a campaign. It was really a scorched earth policy. Also, in terms of the relations with United States allies in Europe and elsewhere. And there are a lot of questions in Europe, within NATO, in Eastern Europe, about the United States' commitment to the NATO alliance going forward.
We're going to get to that in this show. We're going to talk about this. I want to talk about right now how we overcome these divisions. Looking at this campaign, Matthew, you're with Politico. It's like each side has its own media. If you're a conservative, you read Breitbart, you read, the hard right stuff, you go to Alex Jones, If you're more liberal, you go to Politico, you read the Tagesspiegel if you want to know what's happening in your city. How do we bridge these divisions? Everyone's in their own little Facebook and Twitter kind of their own lane. How do we end
I don't think you can. I don't think you can bridge them, and I don't think it really is a matter if you're liberal, you read this, or if you're conservative, you read that. If you're reading some of these places that are not really fact-based, you can read fact-based media that draws on what is actually happening and what is being said and what somebody's record is. You can read those and draw your own conclusions, or you can read some of the places that you're talking about that live in a parallel universe and are running this narrative that is fictional.
But 52% of voters have just said that's not a parallel universe, that is the universe.
Well, that doesn't change the facts, I mean, if that's the universe they want to live in, that's their right. But, I think as responsible journalists, we can't say, oh, well, this is what people want, so we all just have to start making this stuff up. Okay, we can't pretend that he didn't say the things that he did.
What's the word at Tagesspiegel when people talk about this? How is your viewership or your readership doing over there?
I mean, I think our readership is very classical newspaper readers, but we see the same thing in Germany. They are a group that is growing smaller, and you can watch it growing smaller because the media here are not as divided as they are in the United States, but we see similar blogs like Breitbart or Alex Jones popping up here in Europe too, and they have increasing readership too. So I think this is also a lesson we can learn here in Germany as to how bubbles are forming, and I think that part of the success for the AfD that we have seen in elections here this year is also supported by those alternative media that are popping up in the country.
Mm-hmm. Is that a danger to democracy? Does democracy at some point get so fragmented it's difficult to get a consensus?
I think we have to be careful to call it a danger to democracy, because now we have to be good losers as progressives too, and we have to say, well, this is what the people wanted. And if they have drawn this conclusion, if they have come to their voting decision by living in those parallel universes, we still have to accept what they perceive as their reality, and we have to address that. So I wouldn't call it a danger to democracy, but we certainly have to find paths to talk to those people again.
Okay, finding paths to talk to one another. Donald Trump made that difficult with Angela Merkel when he said, Angela Merkel has ruined Germany, referring to the migration crisis. How does Donald Trump now make a bridge across that statement?
Well, I think, Merkel was very smart throughout this by not addressing Trump, by not reacting to that, and by not going after him in the way people like Steinmeier and some of the other German politicians did, because she recognized the importance of the United States as an ally to Germany. So I think, the relationship will remain above this for the Germans, and I think that she'll look the other way, as she had in the past. If you look at, the way Merkel dealt with Berlusconi, the way she dealt with Sarkozy, other people who were difficult partners, I think, this will be forgotten. I don't think they're ever going to be bosom buddies, Merkel and Trump. It's politics, and she understands that was the campaign, but the Staatsräson, as the Germans call it, has to rise above that.
You think that's the way it's going to pan out, Tom?
This might be true for Germany, because Germany always thinks it can get away. But I don't think that this is the case with Donald Trump, because he used Angela Merkel for his campaign. And this was the first time I remember that any German politician ever played a quite significant role in an American election, because he called Hillary Clinton America's Angela Merkel.
Angela Merkel. Okay, I have to say this is tied to a hot-button issue in America. That's the migration debate. So I think it was more related to the issue than the person of Angela Merkel. That would be my take on it. We have heard today from the German foreign minister, we have that soundbite, German foreign minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier says the results of the U.S. election were not what Germany had been expecting, but added that Germany accepts the results in any case. Steinmeier also said that he hopes that there will be no major disruptions in international politics. Let's give a listen.
In the course of the election campaign, Donald Trump has made critical remarks, not only about Europe, but also about Germany. I think that we must adjust to the fact that American foreign policy will become less predictable in the near future. And we must adjust to the idea that America will be more inclined to make decisions on its own.
Okay, America will be more inclined to make decisions on its own. I want to pick up on one specific policy area, and that is Syria right now. There's been a lot of pressure on Germany by the Obama administration to back a possible no-fly zone, American no-fly zone, over Syria. We've heard some background discussions here in Germany about that. How do you see that going? Let's start with you, Anna.
Well, let's see what Donald Trump makes of it, because as in other policy areas too, he hasn't really said what he wants to do in Syria, and people have tried to push him on whether he wants to put ground troops into Syria, and he hasn't really answered that. I don't think Germany would, by any means, and with any American president, follow America and put ground troops into Syria.
But support possibly a no-fly zone with the Bundeswehr aircraft.
Yes, but in his policy paper, he says on Syria, he says he wants to build or work with coalitions, and that's what Obama has been doing all along. And I guess that Germany, given the pressure to have peace in that region here, and very concretely for us here in Germany, will follow along a certain way.
What do you think, Tom?
I think I would like to refer to Steinmeier's quote saying America will be less predictable. What can be less predictable than the Obama administration? Because Obama announced and never did something except of actually causing this migration from Syria. So actually, I think we will have a more predictable politics from Trump, which might not be to the satisfaction of the Germans, or which the Germans might not like. However, I think he will be more predictable.
Okay, it is a very important issue for Germany, the Syria war, isn't it?
Yes, no, it's very important for Germany. It's important for everybody. I would just say to that briefly, Trump himself has said he thinks America needs to be less predictable on the world stage. So he might disagree with you on that point. But clearly, this is the type of issue where he's going to have to make a decision, and it's going to have very important strategic impact in the Middle East and for the European allies. And we really don't know which way he's leaning or where it might go, whether there's a fly zone or whether there are troops, or really the bigger question is, what do you do about Syria? It's a complete disaster, and nothing is going to happen there now for the lame duck period over the couple of months of Obama.
Yeah.
There's a lot of partition pressure, but there's then the whole relationship with Russia, and I think that's really the key question is, how does that play out? What really are his views of Russia, of Putin, and where is that going?
We need to go there right now because we're running out of time. I wanted to talk about NATO. Let's bring that in as well. NATO, Russia. What is Donald Trump going to do about NATO and Russia? Big concern, of course, for Germany, a very close neighbor. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I'd love to know what Donald Trump really wants to do about NATO, but I think that there won't be that much change there, because with Obama's policy of pivot to Asia, of giving more responsibility to the Europeans, Europe sort of had many years to prepare for that moment where America was going to leave us alone. So,
but there's still, what, 60,000 troops here? I mean,
yes, and Germany has started to react. I mean, Angela Merkel has announced this summer that the defense budget would be upbolstered. It still won't be enough to fulfill the 2% line that NATO has given itself. But I think we're going in that direction already, and maybe we have to speed up a little bit now, but maybe it won't be such a radical change from
Donald Trump has indicated he wants 3% of GDP spent on defense. That's the number he has out there. Is that realistic, Matt? What do you think?
Well, it's not, given the current political climate in Europe, where most of Europe is in economic stagnation and has difficulty paying the bills that they have now, to think that France, Spain, countries like that are going to start spending 3% of GDP is a little bit unrealistic. And I think this is one of the big questions, is where he goes with NATO. What does he want from NATO? What does he think the United States' role in Europe should be? And I agree that he'll continue to shift to Asia, because he sees China, and he's right on this, as the only existential threat that exists to the United States now. So it was natural that he would shift more to China. If Clinton had won, she probably would have been, or definitely would have been, the last transatlantic president. And I think this is one of the big sort of important points here, is that the United States is going to continue under Trump to withdraw from Europe. Europe is going to be much more left to its own devices on issues like Ukraine, and probably on issues like Syria as well.
Okay, could we be looking at then a post-transatlantic presidency? Very possibly.
I don't see anything that would stop it. He wants to have a close relationship with the UK. That's another result of this election. You could have a new sort of flowering of the special relationship.
Okay, Matthew, thanks to you so very much. I'd like to thank all our guests for being with us here in this special edition of Quadriga. Matthew Karnitschnig from Politico, Anna Sauerbrey from Der Tagesspiegel, also New York Times, and of course, Tom Goeller, seasoned political journalist. Thanks so much for being with us. And thank you for being with us as well, as America and the world moves into a new era, the era of a Donald Trump America. I'm Brian Thomas. We'll see you again next time.